Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. It looks like Nvidia is at it again. Today we have the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti, and yes, there will be a 4060 later this year, sometime early to mid-summer, but for now we've got the 4060 Ti. And Nvidia has been consistent with their packaging. All of the boxes so far that I've seen are the same. And there it is, the 4060 Ti. Now this is the same form factor as the 4070 that we looked at just recently. In fact, there's the 4070 right now, as you can see, perched on top of my test system. A little hard to focus there. It wants to pick up on everything but the text. But anyway, that's the 4070. So now let's go ahead and get this one out so we can take a better look at it. Alrighty, so I've got the 4070 pulled off the motherboard. So there's the 4070, there's the 4060. You can see they're pretty much identical, other than the coloring and the text, of course, on the side there. The 4060 Ti is more of a silver color, more of a bright silver, and the 4070 is more of a gray, I guess you could call it a dark silver maybe. But again, the housings there are identical. The fan layout, it's also identical between the two. And the business end here, where everything plugs in, it is also identical. We've got three HDMI, or actually three display ports and one HDMI port, a single one on each card here at the bottom. And no surprises, the power connectors there are also the same. And the back of the box actually has a little bit of information. Let me zoom in here. It talks about, let's see, PCI Express graphics slot is required, must have space. Those are the dimensions of the card. 550 watt minimum PSU rating. A lot of people want to know that. 150 watt PCIe Gen 5 power cable, or one PCIe 8-pin cable. So there's an adapter in the box that we'll look at a little bit here. Microsoft Windows 11 or Windows 10. You can go with Linux, 64-bit, and 2 gigabytes of available disk space required for driver installation. Included in the box, of course, is the graphics card, a power connector adapter, and a quick start guide. And let's see, 3-year warranty from Nvidia, and a lot of other languages there that cover the same information. So the big picture, I think, when we're considering these cards as we move down the 40 series, there's no doubt that cards like the 4080 and the 4090, the monsters that they are capable of running pretty much any game. And I know they're adding new games to the list that support the technology, the DLSS 3, the ray tracing and all that. Games are being added all the time. But like I said, there's no question that these can handle that, especially at the higher resolutions, 4K monitors. The question is, for people who don't want to drop, you know, $1,500, $2,000 on these graphics cards, these are more in the price range. The 4060, the 4070, they're more in the price range of what a lot of people may want to spend. So they're concerned with what kind of performance do I get coming in at these price points. So that's one of the things I want to look at really, is compare the 4060 Ti to the 4070. I also have a 4070 Ti that we'll be also taking a look at. Okay, so we can go ahead and get it powered up. The connector here is hidden behind a little trap door. So here's the box. This is your power adapter. You can see it has a 12 volt high power connector on one end, so it's basically 12 plus 4. These little 4 here on the end, these don't actually carry any power, they just carry signal, but this is an adapter, so you can use a standard power supply. Most of your new power supplies are coming with cables that have this 12 volt high power on both ends. For example, this A1000, let's see, A1000G from MSI, it has a dedicated cable there that is just for your graphics cards. So it has this 12 volt high power connector on both ends. Now, as far as drivers go, Since I'm reviewing this, I have to download a special driver from Nvidia that is not released in the wild yet, but it will be when the card comes out. Without that, you'll just download the standard generic Windows driver, and it's not very good. So I'll have to power this up and then get the latest driver from Nvidia loaded so we can take advantage of what the card can do. Now, I always say this on these Nvidia cards. When you're plugging in the connector here, it's very important to make sure that it is fully engaged and fully seated with the socket. It's really important with the higher wattage cards, or the cards that draw the higher power. So it's not quite as big of a deal with these lesser cards. But when you plug it in, you just want to make sure you hear and feel a click, or you feel the engagement when it goes in. I don't know how well that comes through over the microphone, but there is a little click when your tab fully engages. And then look around the bottom where the plug engages the socket and make sure that it is fully seated and there's no gap here along the edge. And then you should be ready to power it up. And now we're going to take a look at the power usage. So you can see things look a little strange here because the card is actually raised up off of the board with this little special riser here from Nvidia that is part of the PCAT system. This is a system or a device that plugs in, so the power comes in from your power supply, goes into this board, and then it goes out to the graphics card. And this is a way to measure the power used, the actual power used in real time by the card. So you can see right now it sort of toggles back and forth to show the voltage and then the wattage or the power that's used. You can see at idle it's not using very much, which is to be expected. So we have the software interface here also, so we can do some cool things with that. But you can sort of see every once in a while there's a little spike where something's going on there with the graphics, but then it drops back down to idle. Now we'll see this shoot up when we put a load on the system, so I'm going to use MSI Combustor to do that. And the fans just kicked on not too long after I got the MSI Combustor powered up. You can see we're monitoring the temperature down here. Fans kicked on maybe 52 degrees Celsius. But we'll run this for a little while and then we'll look at the temperature, see what the maximum temperature is. But we'll also look at the power usage here, and you can see it sort of bounces around a little bit there. We'll look at the PCAT software here on the screen and look, but it looks like we're close to 160 watts, which is right at where this card should be. And again, the temperature is around 58, 57. And with the card maxed out there using MSI Combustor, we're holding at about 62 degrees Celsius, and I have not touched the factory fan curve here, so that's just the normal stock fan curve. Now I could certainly cool the card down a little more if I wanted to get in there and crank the fans up a little bit. You can't even hear these fans running right now. So I did crank the fans up to 70%, and I'm holding here at 54, 55 degrees Celsius, so we knocked a fair amount of temperature off. You can hear the fans now, but normally your graphics card is going to be in your case, so fan noise usually is not a big factor from a graphics card. But we'll go ahead and look at the decibels here, just for the heck of it. Okay, so ambient in the room is around 40 decibels, 39, 40. So I'll hold this about 3 feet away, roughly 1 meter. And at idle, of course, we're going to hold this at around 40 decibels. And then I'll crank the fan up to about 70%, where we were just a minute ago. So there's 73, 2, 1, there's 70. Now let's see. Yeah, change, but not too much. And let's see what this is when we crank it up to 100%. So right around 57, not quite 58. So like I said, normally your graphics card is in a case, so the fan noise is not that big of a concern. So here you can see when we had it cranked out, we were holding right around a little over 150, and you can see we just stopped the stress test, and now we're back down to idle. And if we look a little more closely, you can see we actually peaked out at 176. And again, that can be just a real quick blip, but that's what it registers. And of course, the average is dropping since we're back down to idle. And I should go over the test system here real quick. So the motherboard is a Z790 Carbon Wi-Fi from MSI. CPU is a 13900K. I've got 32 gig of Mushkin DDR5 Redline RAM, and of course the graphics card is the 4060 Ti. And the power supply is sort of tucked away in there, but it is a 1000 watt unit from MSI. It is the MPG A1000G PCIe 5. And I should point out that the monitor is a Viotech. It is a GNV 34dBe. The resolution is 3440 by 1440p. And it is a 144 hertz monitor. Okay, benchmarking here. We'll do some synthetic benchmarks like stuff from Blender, 3D Mark. This is TimeSpy Extreme here. Then we'll go over and do some gaming benchmarks. There's some nice in-game benchmarks. There's the F122. We've got Borderlands, of course, and then there's some benchmarking you can do within Cyberpunk 2077. All right, so I ran through all the benchmarks, recorded all the data, and of course the 4090 is over here, and we go down to the 4060. I have the 3070 in there just for reference from the last generation, and you can compare the numbers, and of course it's, as you would expect, as you go down toward the 4060, your numbers change. And as you compare the numbers, we start over here at the 4090 and work your way down. Each time you take a step down, things scale down in terms of frames per second. They get higher when you're over here on this end, and they start to drop. And the overall performance, of course, drops with each step down. Of course, your price points are different too. You're not paying what you know, the price for a 4060, you're not paying $2,000 like you would, or somewhere around that, for a 4090. 4060 is a $399 card. But what I found interesting, at least to me, is on this end here, your higher end cards, you can crank the graphics all the way up pretty much on every game, and it's pretty much going to work. There are a few exceptions where you might have to dumb a few things down just a little bit to keep the frame rates up. But the frame rates over here are so high that, you know, even if you enable everything and you lose a few frames here and there, a dozen frames, does it really matter? Probably not. But when you get towards the lower end here, now it becomes more of a factor, because you run into situations in certain games where you can't crank the settings all the way to the top. So if you notice here, for example, Cyberpunk 2077 here, we're getting down into some pretty low frame rates here, 38, 23 with DLSS off. So let me show you here what I did. I went and I changed some of the settings here. I have to zoom out a little bit now so you can see everything. There we go. So you can see I'm getting frames up here on this last benchmark that I did. I still have DLSS enabled. To me, that's a game changer. If you can't run with DLSS enabled, you know, that's the whole reason I would want to get a 40 series graphics card, is so that I can take advantage of the latest in the DLSS. Same thing with ray tracing. So what I did was I went in and I was able to leave DLSS enabled, ray tracing enabled. I do have some of these things disabled. And I came in and let me see, I've got the settings here I can show you. So really, I didn't change that much really to get the frame rate up there, because to me anything over 60 is acceptable. That's sort of like the standard for the borderline between what is considered playable and you're getting into the area of not playable. But you can see I have all of these turned off, and I really only brought down a few things. Ambient occlusion. Here I've got screen space reflections quality. There are 2 ticks higher that I could go up to psycho, but I've dropped those down 2 steps. I brought the volumetric cloud quality down 1 step from ultra to high, and it seems like there was another one. Here we go. Local shadow quality. I dropped that down a notch. And you know, you could get in here and mix and match some of these settings and experiment. But like I said, I'm able to get 110 frames per second. To me, that is a more than playable rate. And honestly, when I ran the benchmark with the settings all the way up versus the settings that I have here, I couldn't really tell any difference in the graphics quality, at least not with this monitor. So again, like I was showing earlier, or talking about earlier, this card here is an 8 GB version, which is released here tomorrow. It's $399. The 16 GB version is only going to be $100 more, so it'll be the same card just with more memory. We've got a 4060 coming out in July, and I don't have any of the specs or information on that. Between these two, our specs are going to be the same other than the memory. Everything else it should be the same. And if we sort of compare the last couple generations here, so here's your 2060 Super, your 3060 Ti, your 4060 Ti. You can see the price points were all the same when they originally came out. The $499 is for the 16 GB version here. But when we're comparing apples to apples here, 8, 8, and 8, you can see how the specifications have improved with each generation, and we're also using less energy. Here we bumped up a little bit, but here we're actually down. So this is the lowest average gaming power yet on a 60 series. And again, when you look at the price points compared to the performance here, we're just increasing quite a bit with each iteration. And again, you know, we're staying within that price point, and we're using less power. And for those of you who are interested in folding at home performance, if you're not sure what folding at home is, you can check out the link in the description. It's basically using your GPU horsepower to crunch on some computations for medical research to help find cures for diseases. Anyway, the numbers I'm seeing with the 4060 Ti, and again, this varies from project to project. Sometimes it can be all over the map, but so far on the projects that I've run, I'm seeing between 4 and 5 million points per day, and that's pretty much scaling with what each 40 series card, as we go down from the 4090 to the 4080, 4070. We're seeing, you know, successive drops in the performance, but this is still respectable. So overall, this is a very affordable card. I think you get a lot of bang for the buck. I think it's going to be a very popular little card. What'll be interesting to see is when the 16 GB version comes out, how much difference there really is in performance, if it's really noticeable or not. So I would give this the Overclockers Club Gold Award. This is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.